Hey everyone, welcome back to Music City Workshop and to Toolbox episode number 2, the keyboard. So you can see that we have our standard piano keyboard here. Does anyone know how many keys there are on a standard piano keyboard? Any idea? That's a great question. I don't know either. So let's go ahead and count them together. Okay, ready? We're going to start on the far left side of the keyboard, and then we're going to count all of the keys all the way up to the far right side of the keyboard. Okay, ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. We're about halfway there. 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60. 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, almost there, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, and 88. Okay, so we can see that we have 88 keys on the standard piano keyboard. Oh, hey, keys. Great timing. So as you can see, right, we have 88 keys on the standard piano keyboard. We've just counted them together. We've gone from 1 through 88 from the lowest note on the standard piano keyboard to the highest note on the standard piano keyboard. And again, just a quick item here. I'm going to be referring to the keys on the keyboard as either keys or notes. They're both interchangeable and they both mean the same thing. Great. So what's next? Let's see. Do we notice anything peculiar about the standard piano keyboard? Do we notice any particular patterns? Well, for starters, we can see that there are two colors of keys on the piano keyboard. There are black keys, like this key, and there are white keys, like this key. So it looks like there's about half black keys and half white keys on the piano keyboard. Okay, that's good to know. Let's keep that in mind for later. What else do we notice? Now, just looking at the keyboard visually, just right off the bat, I see that there are certain patterns across the entirety of the piano keyboard. So if I focus on the black keys, I see that there are particular groupings of black keys that look to occur over and over again. So for instance, if I'm going to start on the far left side of the keyboard, I see there are two black keys that are relatively close together, these two. And then I see there are three black keys relatively close together, these three. Then I notice that same pattern again. Two black keys, and then three black keys. Do you see it? Let's see if it continues. Two black keys, three black keys. Let's continue. Two keys, three black keys. Okay, very good. So we see that there are particular patterns within the black keys that occur over and over again throughout the entirety of the piano keyboard. Okay, let's remember that. Does the same thing happen with the white keys? Good question as well. Let's start on this white key right here, right in between the two black keys at the bottom. Let's see if there's any particular pattern that happens over and over again with the white keys. So we notice that we have this white key, and then we have a black key, and then 2 white keys. And then we alternate black, white, black, white, black, and then 2 white keys. Okay. Then we hit that same white key again that's between the 2 black keys. What do we have after it? Then we have a black key again. Then we have 2 white keys. And then we alternate black and white keys, black, white, black, white, black, and 2 white keys again. Okay. And then what's next? We have that key again, that white key again in between the 2 black keys. And then we have a black key, 2 white keys again, and then we alternate black, white, black, white, black, white, white. So that's the 3rd repeating pattern. Then what's next? We have that white key again that's between the 2 black keys. So do you see the pattern that exists from the white keys? If we start with a white key, then we go up certain keys that are identical until we hit the next white key at the same place in the pattern. And then that repeats again, and that repeats again, that repeats again, that repeats again, that repeats again. Okay, do you see it? So now we know that we have black keys and white keys on the standard piano keyboard, and we notice that there are certain patterns that happen again and again within the black keys and the white keys. And it doesn't matter where we start on the piano keyboard. We could start on this black key, we could start on this white key, or we could start on this black key, or we could start on this white key. Whichever key we start on, there's going to be a repeating pattern that happens from one side of the keyboard all the way to the other side of the keyboard, from low to high. So the next question is, how many times does this repeating pattern happen over the course of the 88 keys of the piano keyboard? So if we start, let's start down here. Let's pick the black keys because those are very easy to visualize. Let's start on this first of 2 notes here, which is a black key. And we know there's a pattern that exists from this black key all the way up to the keyboard. Let's go ahead and count how many times this pattern repeats. So this repeating pattern is going to be 2 black keys and 3 black keys, right? So that's the first instance of pattern. Instance number 1 is this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we hit the first black key of the 2 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the second repeating pattern. Then we hit the first of the 2 black keys again. That's the third of the repeating patterns. Now we hit the first black key again. That's the 4th repeating pattern. Now let's hit the next group. That's the 5th repeating pattern. Let's continue. That's the 6th repeating pattern. Let's continue up toward the ends of the keyboard. And that's the 7th repeating pattern. So just picking this black key pattern randomly, starting with this black key and ending with this black key, we notice that the pattern repeats 7 times across the piano keyboard. If we pick different keys on the keyboard, we'll notice that in general, they're either going to repeat 7 times throughout the keyboard or 8 times throughout the keyboard. It depends on how low we start or how high we start on the piano keyboard. Next, let's pick a random key on the keyboard and then let's count up keys from that random key and see if we can find a place that sounds like the pattern has repeated again. We can use our ears to listen, but we can also use our eyes to look at the visual piano keyboard here on screen to see if we notice a point in time when we count up keys to where we have a key that sounds the same or looks the same as the starter key. So for instance, we're going to let's start on this white key right here. We're going to start on this white key and we're going to play each key above that key, and we're going to listen to each key, and then we're going to see if it matches the starter key or if it looks like it's the same key on the visual keyboard. For instance, we're going to play the starter key first, and then we're going to play the key that is to the right of that, the next key up, which is this key. Now, do those either sound the same or do they look like they're the same key on the keyboard in the repeating pattern? No, I think that they're completely different keys and they don't sound the same. Let's pick the next key up. Let's try that. No, that one also sounds different and it looks like a different key placement on the keyboard. Let's try the next one. That one sounds different as well. And it looks different. Let's try the next one up. Sounds nice, but it still sounds different. And it also looks different. Let's try the next one. That sounds very good, but it's definitely a different note. And it also looks like it's on a different place on the keyboard. Let's try the next one. That one sounds very different, right? And one of them's a white key, one's a black key. We know that those are not the same at the same place on the keyboard. Let's try the next one. That sounds great, but definitely a different note and a different place on the keyboard. Let's try the next one. That sounds a lot different as well. Also looks different. Try the next. Interesting sound, but that's definitely not the same note. Try the next one. That one also is different. Let's keep going. Try the next one. That one sounds very different. It's not the same note and it doesn't look the same note on the piano keyboard. Let's try the next one. Ah! Do you hear that? That sounds like it's the same note, only higher, right? There's the low version. Here's the high version. That sounds like it's actually the same note, but one is low and one is high. And if we look on the keyboard, the positioning on the keyboard in the pattern, we notice that the low note starts and then it has a black key, black key, and then two white keys, right? Let's try the high one. Okay, we notice that as a black key, black key, two white keys. So they're at the same position on the piano keyboard visually, and they also sound like they're the same note, only one is low and one is high. That's very interesting. What do we call this particular situation where we have one note on the keyboard that is lower than the other note, but they sound the same and they look like they're at the same position in the keyboard? This particular scenario is called an octave. As you can see, the definition of an octave is the interval between two musical notes where the higher note has a frequency twice that of the lower note. So we can see that there are a couple of new terms here that we're going to have to look into further. We see that the word frequency is here highlighted in orange. So we're going to have to look at that, which we will do in a second. Very good. So now we know that we have situations on the keyboard where we have two notes where one is higher and one is lower, but they sound the same and they also look like they're in a similar position on the keyboard, and that is called an octave. Let's count the notes and the keys that are between these two notes that are considered an octave. We started here on this note, we ended here on this note. So let's count the keys in between. So this is key number 1, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then back to 1. So as you can see, there are 12 keys on the keyboard that are between the higher and the lower note in this special situation called an octave. And we can find that anywhere on the keyboard, no matter which two notes we pick. Let's pick this black note right here. As before, we can see that this is the lower note in the octave, and then the higher note is going to look the same on the keyboard and sound the same, which is this note. You see they're both the middle black key in the different groupings of 3 black keys. This one, and they both sound the same, only one is higher and one is lower. Let's try to count the number of keys that are in between these keys as well. It should equal 12, but let's just confirm and see if that's the case. So here's key 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, back to 1. So that does confirm it then. It doesn't matter where you start on the piano keyboard. If you pick any note, you can pick this 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 note. If you count up or down 12 keys, then you will get back to the starting note again, only it's going to be sounding like it's higher than the original note or lower than the original note. And that situation, as we discovered earlier, is called an octave. Now, do you remember in the last episode, we talked about sound waves, correct? So we talked about how sound waves are created from hitting the head of a drum with a mallet. Those sound waves traveled through the air, and then they were directed by our outer ears and collected by our ear canals. And then those sound waves were amplified in the inner ear, changed into an electrical signal, and then they traveled to the brain where they were then interpreted as a sound. Now, sound waves have a particular characteristic, and that characteristic is called pitch. As you can see here, pitch is defined as how high or low a particular sound is. So for instance, if we took our starter notes from our octave before, this note, and then this note up here, which is the second note in the octave, we notice that this note is lower than this note. So we say that the second note has a higher pitch than the first note. And the first note has a lower pitch than the second note. So now we know that sound waves have a particular characteristic called pitch, and that is how high or low the note is. Now, additionally, sound waves also have a characteristic called frequency. As you can see here, the definition of frequency is how fast the sound waves vibrate as they move through the air. Okay, that's very cool. So sound waves move through the air at a certain speed, and they vibrate at that speed, and the speed at which they vibrate is called the frequency of the sound wave. Also, we can see that the frequency of a sound wave is measured in a unit called hertz, which is abbreviated Hz. So as we listen to a sound, this sound here, we know that that sound has a particular pitch. It's either low or high. And we also know that that sound has a particular frequency, which is how fast the sound waves are vibrating through the air. So going back to the definition of an octave from before, we know that the octave is the interval between two musical notes where the frequency of the higher note is twice that of the lower note. So we can say that in an octave, the frequency of the higher pitch is twice the frequency of the lower pitch. And the pitches sound the same, except that one pitch sounds twice as high as the other pitch. And that is because the sound waves of the higher pitch vibrate twice as fast as the sound waves of the lower pitch. Very good. So now we know what octaves are, we know what pitch is, we know what frequency is. Let's continue with the next topic on the piano keyboard. Does anyone know what the names are of the 88 keys on the keyboard? Right? Previously, we counted the keys. We know there are 88 keys on the keyboard. We know that they repeat in certain patterns. The question now is, does anyone know the names of the 88 keys on the piano keyboard? Let's start with the first key on the keyboard, this white key down here at the bottom. Now you'll notice that there's a letter above that key when I press it. That letter is A. Interesting. Let's pick the next white key. See what it says on the piano keyboard here as well. That says B. Okay, A, B. Let's pick the third white key. See what that says. That says C, A, B, C. I'm starting to sense a pattern here. Let's try the fourth white key. D, okay, that pattern's continuing. Let's try the fifth white key. E, makes sense. Let's try the sixth white key. F, okay, let's try the seventh white key. G, okay, let's try the eighth white key. A, So we started with the first white key, and then we pressed every white key moving forward. B, C, D, E, F, G, and then we go back to A again. Those are the first 7 letters in the English alphabet, right? They're also the first 7 white keys on a standard piano keyboard. Let's press them again. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, back to A. Let's see if that continues. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, back to A. It does. So that's the second repeating pattern. Let's see if it continues. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. It does. There's the third pattern. Let's try again. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. It does again. Let's continue. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. There we go. The fifth pattern. Let's try again. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. The sixth pattern. And let's continue. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. The seventh pattern. And then you'll notice A, B, C, and we run out of piano keyboard. So just by going up the white keys on the piano keyboard, we can see that the first white key starts with the first letter of the alphabet, that's A, and then it repeats 7 times up until this A. And it repeats the first 7 letters of the English alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Back to A. Very good. So now we know what the names of the white keys are on the standard piano keyboard. And we can visually match them throughout the patterns of the white keys on the keyboard to see which ones are the same notes. So we know that, for instance, the fourth key is called D. And we notice that D is the white key between the 2 black keys. Right? We have these 2 black keys, and the white key between those 2 black keys is called D. So if we move up through the other 7 patterns on the piano keyboard, we should find the next 2 black keys, and we should see that the note between those 2 black keys should also be called D. Is this correct? Yes, it is. Now let's move up again to the other 2 black keys. And the white key between those 2 black keys should again be called D. It is. Let's move up again. Yes, that's D as well. Let's move up again between the 2 black keys. Yes, that white key is called D. Let's move up again. Yes, that white key is called D. And then the final key up here at the very top, that is also called D. So we know that the white keys on the piano keyboard that are between the pair of black keys, these 2 black keys, these 2, these 2, these 2, these 2, these 2, these 2. The white key between all of those black keys is called a D. So let's press them all and confirm that. Correct. So now we know that the white key between the 2 black keys on the piano keyboard is always called a D. We can pick another letter on the keyboard and try to confirm to see if that's the case for all of the different letters. Let's pick the note that is before the pair of 2 black keys. So here's the pair of 2 black keys again. Let's pick the white key before the 2 black keys. So we know that one is called C. So let's move up and pick the next white key before the next 2 black keys, which is this key. That's also called C. Let's move up again and see if that repeats. It does. Let's pick the next white key before those two black keys. That does repeat. It's also called C. Let's pick the next white key. That one does repeat. Let's pick the next one before the two black keys. That one does as well. Let's pick the next one. That's also called a C. And then let's pick the final one way up at the top at the end of the keyboard. That one is also called C. So we know that the white key that's directly before the pair of two black keys, right? This key right here, here are the two black keys. The white key just prior to the two black keys is called C, and that is the same all the way up the keyboard. Very good. Now we know where the note D is on the piano keyboard. We know where the note C is on the piano keyboard. We can do that with all of the other 7 letters of the alphabet for the white keys on the keyboard. We'll do one last example here. Let's pick the white key that is just before the grouping of 3 black keys. So our first grouping of 3 black keys are these 3 keys here. The white key before those 3 black keys is this one. And we can see that that white key is called F. So now I think what's going to happen is that if we pick that same key before the grouping of 3 black keys all the way up to the keyboard, we're going to see that all of those notes are called F. Here's the first one, and then the 3 black keys. Okay, here's the next one. Yes, it's called F, and then the 3 black keys. Okay, let's pick the next one before the 3 black keys. It's that one, that's also called F. Let's pick the next one up. That one is also called F. Let's pick the next one. That one is also called F. Let's pick the next one. That one is also called F. And pick the final one. That one is also called F. Great. So we know that at any point in the keyboard, we can pick a particular white key, and then we can count up to the next pattern on the keyboard, and that key will be the same note name as the pattern below it. And we know that the note names start with A at the very bottom of the keyboard, this key here. It goes to G as you count up, and then it repeats A again to G again, A to G, A to G, A to G. Excellent. So now that we know how the white keys are named, what about the black keys? The black keys seem to be a little different. We noticed that when we pressed on some keys before, we had some different symbols and notation on the black keys. So I'm just going to press on some random black keys here, right? You know that it's not just a letter, there's a symbol after it. Same with this one, same with this one, same with this one, same with that one, same with that one. So the black keys seem to have a letter name, but then a symbol after each letter. So the black keys are named slightly different from the white keys. Let's do an example here and figure out what the name of the black key is right before this key. So we know that this white key here is called E. We learned that prior. Now we want to figure out what the black key's name is that's right before that key. If I press the black key, you'll see it also has an E, but it has a symbol after that E. Here's the white key. That's called E. The black key just before it is also called E, but it has this weird notation that looks like a lowercase b after it. That particular lowercase b symbol is called a flat. You can see here that a black key that is positioned right before a white note is called a flat, and the sound of that flat note is 1 key lower than the white key. So here we have the white key, which is E, and then the sound of the note that is just before it is called E flat, and that is 1 key lower sounding than the white key. Great. So now we know that a flat key's pitch is slightly lower than the pitch of the white key after it. We can pick any white key in the keyboard and test that as well. Let's pick this white key right here, and let's try to figure out what the name of the black key is that's just to the left of this key. just slightly before this key. So this white key is called A. The black key right before it should be called A with a lowercase b flat symbol. Let's see if that's the case. It is. Very good. So now we know that this black key that is right before the A is called A flat, and the pitch of this A flat key is slightly lower than the pitch of the A key. Let's do another example. Let's pick this key here. We know that the white key between the two black keys is called D. We learned that earlier. What do we think the name of the black key just to the left of this D key is? So if the previous patterns are correct, the black key right to the left of this D key should be called D flat, and it should have a D with a lowercase b symbol. Let's see if that's the case. It is. Okay, very cool. So we know that this white key is called D, and the black key right before this white key is now called D flat, and the pitch of the D flat key is slightly lower than the pitch of the D key. Excellent. Now we know that there are black keys that are called flats, and they have a lowercase b symbol attached to them, and the flat keys are slightly lower than the white key that is right after that black key. What about if a black key is slightly higher than the white key? What is that called? What does the symbol look like? So for instance, let's pick this key right here. This white key we know is called F. We did that in an example earlier. Now, if we want to figure out the name of the black key right after this white key, we're going to go to the right and up instead of to the left and down. What do we think the name of this black key is here right after the F key? Let's check it out and see. Aha! That does not have the flat lowercase b symbol. That has a # number symbol associated with it. It still has the letter F. Here's your normal F white key. The black key above it still has the letter F, but it has a # after it. That particular # symbol after a letter name is called a sharp. So a black key positioned right after a particular note, a particular white note, is slightly higher in pitch than that white note, and it is called a sharp. So again, this white key here is called F. The black key right after it is called F sharp with a #, and the pitch of the F sharp key is slightly higher than the pitch of the F key. Very interesting. So to recap, we know that the names of the white keys all have a name that is either A, B, C, D, E, F, or G, the first 7 letters of the alphabet, depending upon where you start on the keyboard. And that repeats 7 or 8 times all the way up through the end of the keyboard. And now we know that the black keys are either called a flat or a sharp with a letter name, depending on if the black key is before the white key or after the white key, meaning is the black key slightly lower sounding in pitch than the white key or slightly higher sounding in pitch than the white key. If the black key is slightly lower sounding in pitch, then it's called a flat. If the black key is slightly higher sounding in pitch, then it is called a sharp. A good thing to note here is something called an enharmonic. An enharmonic is when we have two sounds that sound identical, but their names can be labeled 2 different ways. For instance, I mentioned that if you have a white key like this F and you want to figure out the name of the black key that's slightly higher than the F, you would call that an F sharp because the sound, the pitch of the black key is slightly higher than the pitch of the white key, an F sharp. However, we can also call that a flat if we're going to start with the G key instead, right? The G key is here if we are going to be trying to figure out from the G what the name of the previous lower sounding black key is, but we want to call it with G in its name. We would then, instead of an F sharp, we would call it, what do we think we call it? instead of the F sharp, if we're going to start with a G and we're going to go down slightly, we're going to call that G flat. So you can see here, this particular black key, if we start from the F, we can call it F sharp. If we start from the G, we can call it G flat. And that particular scenario where we have the same exact sound and pitch with two different names, that is called an enharmonic. And that works for any key on the keyboard. So next, what would we like to learn next about the keyboard? Well, we know that pianists play the keyboard with both of their hands, with two hands, right? Typically one hand is on one side of the keyboard and one hand is on the other side of the keyboard. So it makes sense to know what is considered the middle point of the piano keyboard, so we know how to divide our hands up appropriately. Well, we learned prior that there are 88 keys on the keyboard, right? If we start on this note down here, C, we know that's a C, we learned that earlier. If we start there, you can see at the very bottom of that key, you can see the little small letters that say C1. If we go to the next key, up, the next C up, we see that that one is labeled C2. If we go to the next C up, we see that that one is labeled C3. If we go to the next C up, that one is labeled C4. And we also see C5, 6, 7, and 8. So for our purposes, the middle point on a standard piano keyboard is considered this C note here, which is labeled C4. So if we want to find a place to put our left hand on the keyboard, we know that it's going to be left of this C note for the most part. And if we're going to look to place our right hand on the keyboard, we know it's going to be to the right of this C here. What is this C4 called on a standard piano keyboard? It is called middle C. So as you can see, the definition of middle C is the midpoint of the standard piano keyboard, and it is the note called C4. Great, so we've learned a lot about the standard keyboard today. One last thing that we want to look into is the different tuning systems for standard pianos. Now, there are a few different tuning systems for pianos throughout the history of music. However, most pianos today are tuned to a particular system, and that system is called equal temperament. Equal temperament is a piano tuning system that divides each octave on the keyboard into 12 equal steps. So we learned prior that if you take one note on the piano keyboard, such as this one, and you count up 12 steps, you're going to get the next A. And then if you count the next 12 steps, you're going to get the next A. So equal temperament is a system in which we tune our pianos so that there are 12 equal steps within each particular octave on the piano keyboard. Also, remember before when we introduced the term pitch, how high or low a note sounds? So for equal temperament tuned pianos, the standard starting pitch for equal temperament is this note right here. This note is called A4 because it's the fourth A on the keyboard, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is called A4. And it is the pitch by which we begin to tune piano keyboards if we're going to tune the piano according to equal temperament tuning. This A4 note is tuned to a frequency of 440 hertz. So anytime we're going to be tuning a standard piano, we're going to be starting with this note here, A4, and we're going to be tuning that note to a pitch with a frequency of 440 hertz. Once we have that note tuned to 440 hertz, then we can tune all of the rest of the notes on the piano keyboard in reference to that A4 starting note. Also, do you remember earlier that we had the term octave that we learned? So an octave is when we have one note and then we have a higher note that sounds twice as high as that note. So this A here, here's the starting A, which is lower. Here's the next A, which is higher. So in this case, A4 has a frequency of 440 hertz. Now, if we go up one octave to this A, that means that this A should be twice as much as the frequency of the first A. So 440 times 2 is 880. So the frequency of this second higher A is 880 hertz on a standard equal temperament tuned piano. Excellent. So we learned a lot today. We discovered a whole bunch of new terms. We learned a lot about the piano keyboard. Let's go back and recap all of the different topics that we learned today. Hey, what's up, Retro? Cool. So thanks for joining us, Retro. Retro, what things did we learn today about the standard piano keyboard? Let's see. Right. First, we learned that there are 88 keys on a standard piano keyboard, right? We learned that there are black keys and white keys, and we learned that there are particular repeating patterns throughout the keyboard. What did we learn next? Right. Next, we learned about an octave. Right, the octave is the interval between two musical notes where the higher note has a frequency that is twice that of the lower note. Very good. So we know what an octave is. What did we learn next? Right, we learned that pitch is how high or how low a particular note sounds. Very good. And then, right, also we learned that frequency is how fast a particular sound wave vibrates through the air. And frequency is measured by a unit called hertz. Very good. And then what did we learn? Right, then we learned how the different notes are named on the piano keyboard. So we learned that the white keys are named after the first 7 letters in the English alphabet, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then that repeats again all the way throughout the white keys from one end of the keyboard to the next. Very good. Then we learned about the black keys. We learned that if we want to name a black key that is before a white key, we're going to call that black key a flat, and we're going to give that black key a particular symbol that looks like a lowercase b. And a flat is a black key that sounds slightly lower than the white key after it. Next, we learned that if you want to name a black key that is slightly higher than a white key, you're going to name that note a sharp, and you're going to use the pound sign symbol. So that black key is going to have a letter name plus the sharp symbol following it. Then we learned about enharmonic. Enharmonic is when we have a note that sounds the same, but it can be named in 2 different ways, right? It can either be named a flat if we're going to name it from a particular white key that's after the black key, or it can be named a sharp if we're going to name it after a particular white key that is before the black key. So any key on the keyboard can be named in 2 different ways depending upon which key you're going to start with. Next, we learned that the midpoint of a piano keyboard is the note called C4. And lastly, we learned that if we're going to tune a standard piano, we are going to start with the note A4, and we are going to tune that note to a frequency of 440 hertz. And then afterwards, we can tune every key on the keyboard in relation to that starting key. Very good. Well, we certainly learned a lot today. We learned all about the standard piano keyboard, and there are a lot of concepts that we discovered today that we are going to use in the following episodes of the Toolbox. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. And join us next time for the next episode, episode number 3 in the Toolbox, called The Building Blocks of Music. You're not going to want to miss that one. Thanks, everyone. Looking forward to seeing you next time. Bye.